I'm at the Balmoral Cemetery with Norm Love, President of Friends of the Balmoral Cemetery, who will be taking us for a guided walk around the cemetery, and also there will be a booklet launch. So, yep. Hi, Norm.
Hi. Yes, we're at the cemetery today because we've been researching the veterans that are in the cemetery for so long now, about 5 years, and being the 100th anniversary of Anzac, we decided that we had to do something for that. So we've found 7 veterans who have memorials in the cemetery, and they have now got plaques on them. So we're going to do a little walk around the park shortly and describe the situations that some of these veterans went through.
Could you give us a brief history about the cemetery itself?
Yes, well, the cemetery, the first trustee for the cemetery was in 1865. The cemetery was gazetted in 1869, and its first recorded burial was a young fellow called William Ponting, and he was buried here in 1874. I say the first recorded because there may be others here that we don't know about. So that in itself was an interesting discussion, but we'll go on for that a different day.
Would you like to share an interesting story about one of the Anzac diggers?
Well, we have lots of stories here. The main story I felt out of the 7 researched is that Herbert Fowles, Bert Fowles they called him, he's got a memorial here, and we found interesting thing from his mother. His mother had to write to the General, Campbell Robinson at the time, to get the date changed because they received the date of his death as the 2nd of May. And what happened was Mrs. Fowles had found out that he was actually killed on Anzac Day. And she sent letter after letter to all the different people that were in the war at the time, and she found that he had actually been killed on Anzac Day. And she sent letters off to all these generals and that to get the dates changed. So that's another thing. And when we looked at the grave, there are actually 3 veterans in that same grave, and one was Lieutenant Colonel Fowles, and he has got a big article in the newspapers of the day, but we're here to talk about Bert. And poor old Sergeant Bert was killed on the day, and it must have been rather harrowing for Mum to have to write these letters to the generals to get all this fixed up. So I thought that was pretty sad for her to do that, considering she came from a military family.
Could you give us a preview about the booklet launch?
Well, the booklet launch is what we've decided is we would give all the veterans eventually. There's 56 killed in action veterans memorialised here, and there's something like 211 that we've found who are buried here after the war. So, and we're still finding more. With these veterans, we thought that it would be best to do the ones for Anzac Day. And with the 7 of them, we've got a little trail here that we can walk people through, and they can follow it in the booklet, and we've tried to put a little map there. And the booklet and the map, we're going to try and keep them in the little shed that's at the cemetery near the Bennetts Road gates, and that's for the people to can come, have a look at the book, go for a walk, and go around and look at the plaques and the graves. So.
Thank you. Thanks, Norm. Over to you, Tim.
I'd like to welcome everybody here today. It's a pretty big day for us. It's the first time we've done anything on our veterans, and we're not going to talk about Gallipoli and all that, other than the fact that the veterans here are from Gallipoli and they're only memorialised here. I'd like to acknowledge that the fact that the Aboriginal people used to walk this land here once, and I've been told that on the hills around here is where they used to get up and watch, and one of the Aboriginals told me they got up there to watch where the animals went, and they used to chase them off down to the point at Balimba Point there, and that's what they could trap the animals with the water behind them. So, but they used all of the hills around here. But today is really about our little veterans, and I'd like to let you know that we've been looking at this for about 5 years, and it's come across because of the state government grant that was put out last year that we got the second round of grant through, and we'd like to thank Aaron Dillaway for helping us get that set up, by the way, and now we've got Di who's helping us finish it off. So we've got a long way to go, and out of the veterans we've got 56 veterans from are memorialised here. So, and there are another 211 that we've found so far that are buried here that came back. Now, not everyone was from our area, and you'll find that on your walk today. But what I'd like to do is pass that over to Jenny, who's going to give you a bit of a rundown on the things, and I'd like you to have a look at those around there. And of course today is our book launch, so the little booklet, we'll be handing them out shortly. You'll be able to take one of those and go for a walk sometime yourself after this. So we're hoping to leave them in here. And I would also like to make a really special thanks to the City Council, who have really come to the party. They've got they just mowed about 2 days ago, and they've helped us with marking out the grounds and helping keep the particular graves clean. So and thank you. And Tony's just here. He's from the Wynnum Cemetery, and thank you, Tony, for that. Okay. And Leanne's here. Sorry, Leanne. Sorry. Yes. And is Darren here? Darren's over there. And thank you, Darren. Darren spends a lot of time with us, putting up with us, telling what's right and wrong around the place. But I think anyone that's come here recently and compared it to 10 years ago would really see that the cemetery has come alive. So thank you. I'll pass you on to Jenny. Literally, yeah.
Thanks, Norm. The microphone is that we're recording today. We feel like movie stars today, not in fact to project my voice. So I am absolutely amazed that so many people have come today. I think I said to Norm I thought there'd be about 10 people. So the first thing is thank you to all of you for coming and participating in this event. Norm's given you some of the things that I was going to talk about. Julie Gustafsson and I started this project of documenting the killed in actions from the First World War that are memorialised here, and we started that a couple of years ago and said, this will take us 6 weeks maybe, and 2 years later we're still at it. Perhaps that was what some of these early boys and men thought when they enlisted, that it'd be over in 6 weeks. So we've been at it for quite a long time. 56 memorialised soldiers here, all killed in action in largely in Gallipoli, and the 7 you'll see today are in Gallipoli, a couple in Egypt, and the rest in France. And they represent such a range of soldiers, of ages. In this group, you get a sense they were very eager to join up, to participate. But over the total course of the project, Julie and I have often wondered why these men, what was in their own minds, why they were motivated to join up. And we've also wondered what on earth they'd think of us 100 years later, digging them up and having them like ghosts emerge from the past into real life people. So I did find some words during the week for something else, and I thought, well, they really capture some of our thoughts about why these men joined up. They're not my words, they're the words of one of Australia's great orators, Paul Keating, in 1993 when he participated in the return of the unknown soldier to Australia. And he said about that unknown soldier, and it could be about any of these, that he may have been one of those who believed that the Great War would be an adventure too grand to miss. He may have felt that he would never live down the shame of not going. But chances are that he went for no other reason than that he believed it was his duty and the duty he owed his country and his king. So thank you again for coming today. Do join us on the walk. Norm will give you a few more details about that. We're also hugely privileged today to have both our local councillor, and Norm's talked about the support we get from council, and also our state member, Di Farmer. So I'd like to just pass over to either both of these ladies, and then Norm will give you some instructions about the walk. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. Can I start by acknowledging each and every member of the Friends of Balmoral Cemetery group who have put their heart and soul into developing this book and this walk for us all here today. The soldiers who are memorialised in this cemetery as a consequence of this book have come to life as a result of your work. And you should be enormously proud of the work you've done on preserving our history about these fine men. To each and every one of you here, thank you for coming along to support the work of the Friends of Balmoral Cemetery and for taking time out of your Anzac Day to be with us here today. Can I acknowledge the Brisbane City Council staff that are here today, Leanne, Tony and Darren at the back there. I know you guys work in partnership with the Friends of Balmoral Cemetery who give that extra TLC to our cemetery. So thank you for your hard work in working in partnership with our local community here, in addition to your regular duties at our Brisbane cemeteries. Thank you.
Thank you, and it's such an honour to be here today. I don't know if all of you realise, but there are only about, how many is it, Norm? How many members of Friends of Balmoral Cemetery?
30 members, but only about 10 active ones, I would say.
10 active members, and room for more. That was a plug, just in case you missed it. But they are the work they've done today to produce this amazing booklet, and I want to talk a little bit about that, but just to be the stewards of this place here. And they are the people who connect us to our history and our heritage in this area. And the graves here tell us about our past in this community. And it's a way, Shane and I always talk about what an amazing close community this is here, and that's because there are groups like Friends of Balmoral Cemetery that help us make the connections. And this booklet today, which has just taken so much work, has been an amazing vehicle for that. Over the last week, Shane and I have visited every single local school, and kids like to know what is their place in space and time. And at every single service, we have quoted your booklet and helped them connect to who they are and to who their history is. And that's what this booklet is. It connects us to what happened 100 years ago, and the work that the Friends of Balmoral Cemetery is doing in the future is connecting us to future conflicts, but also everything that this community is about. So I can't tell you how hard they work. They just put so many hours in, and they absolutely love it. Absolutely love it. And I just acknowledge I'm the state member, but I acknowledge the council officers as well, please, because you guys just make such a big difference, and it's wonderful. And here you are, here today on a public holiday. So it's lovely. But thank you to you all for really coming along and actually acknowledging not only how important a project like this is, but how important this absolutely beautiful group is to our community. So thank you. And I've got my walking shoes on. I hope everybody else is coming for this walk, because I can't wait. It's going to be absolutely fascinating. Thank you.
I'm not quite finished because we do have some special people here today. We've got, I think there's 3 Vietnam veterans here, is that right? The 3? And without the effort they put in today at Bulimba Memorial Park, I reckon there was 5,000 people there. The biggest crowd I've ever seen down there at the Memorial Park this morning. And, you know, if it wasn't for those guys or their group, we wouldn't have had that ceremony there today, I don't think. I'm pretty sure of that. So thank you. Yep. Right, so little things we have to do around here. We hope you've all got hats and sunscreen, etc., for your own personal protection. What I've tried to do when we've walked around here, we've put arrows to take us to the different sites. If you see a line beside the arrow, we want you to try and stay in between that, because there may be a grave or there may be a rock or a tree root or something there. Wherever we have seen some on our walk, we've tried to spray the orange paint onto that too, so that you can see that coming. We don't walk on graves, and we don't touch them if we can avoid to. Sometimes you might have to just stop yourself falling or whatever. So we respect the graves like that. We don't walk them. Some of them are falling in, so that's another reason not to. You don't want to go in there with them. And some of the graves are really, shall we say, unsafe maybe with the monument, so just be very careful about that. So that's a bit of a safety, a bit of a safety issue there. But we've worked it so that we believe we've got the easiest way through. The first grave is just up here, but the next grave is at the top of the hill, so we do have to walk up a pretty steep hill to get to the top. But once you're at the top, there's 4 or 5 graves up there on the flat area, and then we've got one more down the other side. So just to give you an idea of what we've got to do. And then when we get to the last one, we can actually walk back along this road. So I think the Betty's there. You happy there?
Yes, thank you.
Okay. Now, do we want to do 2? Just one group will go as. That means when we get near the graves, we'll have to wait around and you can listen to what's going on. Does that make you all happy? And if it looks like it's getting too much, well, we'll do a second group behind. There's only a couple of bottles of water there, so we thought we'd keep that handy. Yep. You right there, mate? Okay. Yeah.
So this is Frederick George Groom, and his details are here on the side of the grave, and you'll also see the little sign here. These are on all of the graves, and eventually will be on all of the KIA graves. Groom was our 5th of the 7 Gallipoli veterans here to die, and he had association with this area. This was a family grave that he's memorialised on. You can see a very old grave, but he actually enlisted from Ayr in North Queensland. And the other quite interesting thing about him is he put his age down to join, and we hear a lot about soldiers that put their age up to join and were very, very young. Groom died aged 35. A year earlier he was 30 on his enlistment notices, so there was probably just as much movement of ages of the top down as there was from the bottom up. He'd been in the militia, and that's a common theme through many of these soldiers, that they'd been in reserve type military forces. So Frederick George Groom. Born in England and came to Australia as a child with his family, probably joining other family here, and this is why there's a family grave. So we might keep going. It's a very big hill. Just up here on the right before we get here is one of our historic graves. This is the people who were the inventors of Stone's ginger beer.
This one?
Yeah,
Oh, founder of Stone's Corner?
that's right. And this too is quite a well-known early family. Wiley were particularly prominent on Moreton Bay. That's really the worst of the walk. It's sort of just a little way the rest, and then largely downhill for the rest. So the grave in front of us now is John Firram Disraeli. He enlisted from Dalby, but the Disraeli family were early pioneers in photography in Brisbane and in the Darling Downs, in Toowoomba and out into Dalby, and there's still a studio of that name operating. During the project, we've had contact from someone else who's got a particular interest in researching photographers from the First World War, and it's actually through him that the beautiful photo of Jack Disraeli that we were able to source and use. So he's here memorialised on his parents' grave. He was a photographer before he enlisted, and again quite young really, 21 when he enlisted, and of course for these men, they usually were leaving Australia in late 1914, and here we are 4, 5, 6 months later, and they've died in action at Gallipoli. So that's Jack. He was the last of our group to die. He died on the 22nd of August. And the other connection with him is that 3 of our 7 all left Australia on the same boat. The Omra, which left Pinkenba in September of 1914. And those of you, I'm sure a few of you are Facebook subscribers to Lost Brisbane, and you probably saw that wonderful picture last night of the procession through Queen Street on the 19th of September. Well, that would have been the group, including Jack Disraeli, who left a couple of days later on the Omra from Pinkenba. So we're just up only a few metres behind us for the next one. So we've all got our favourites in this, and my partner in this project, Julie, this is her favourite, Herbert Howard Kentwell Fowles, and I think when you hear his story, it's a pretty amazing one. He was a teacher, a very young teacher. He'd gone through school, become a pupil student or a student pupil, and moved on to be a teacher. And he taught around the inner city schools in Brisbane and also out at Gatton. But he was also a young man going somewhere. He was a scoutmaster and a sailor and various other things. His father was a teacher and his grandfather were teachers here in Brisbane. The only boy of 5 or 6 children, he was in the middle. His father was a lieutenant colonel. He'd served in the Boer War, and he went on to serve right throughout the First World War on the transport ships and here in Australia. But Herbert's story is a particularly sad one. He left with Jack Disraeli on the Omra in September, and he died in the landing of Gallipoli, and he was shot in the back accidentally by his own troops, coming off and landing on the beaches in Gallipoli. One of, I think, a couple of hundred Australians who did die in that landing. So all that potential, that amazing man, and that backstory of the father's duty to country that pushed him on to, obviously, to continue to serve his country throughout the entire length of the war, and then go back into civilian life and teach. And in the booklet, there's a little obituary to Lieutenant Colonel Kentwell Fowles. They all had wonderful names, this family, and he's buried here with his wife. So if you want to sort of come and have a look and turn around and come back down here. We have a lot of Mackays or Mackays, depending on, I guess, where you come from in the cemetery. And this one is a Mackay grave, one of the obviously early pioneers of Mackay. I guess I should call it Mackay, shouldn't I? But our soldier memorialised here was Francis Leofric Armstrong. He married into this family. Again, a man who'd been active in the local militia. He was a bank clerk, early 30s when he enlisted. And so I guess another one drawn by that sense of his obligation and his role. He had married not long before he joined up, and subsequently had a child that was born before he died, but he never saw that child. He'd already left Australia by that stage. So there's quite a bit about him in the little booklet. Do read it, including the really poignant letter that was retrieved after he died, that he had written to his wife the night before they went into this particularly heavy fighting. A fairly common practice, and one that you might have heard some of these letters emerge, both letters that were written by men who subsequently were killed in those battles, but equally some of the letters have survived where the soldiers survived as well, and they must have been quite amazing things for people to read when they returned, or for subsequent generations. So that's Frank Armstrong. So we'll just move on to where Norm is. I might go in there. Yeah. Now this one you will have to look hard to see Clement Lionel Edgerton Ragg on this particular grave here. This was another quite substantial family grave, and if we do interest any of you in connecting with the Friends of Balmoral, here's a family that you could easily spend a couple of years researching, I think. So again, another enlistment of someone in their 30s. Clement was a student when he enlisted. He came from, though, a most unusual and interesting family. His father was the first meteorologist in Queensland, something of a colourful and eccentric man from a sort of like a true scientific background. They were Scottish, and Clement was born in Scotland. He came from quite a large family. There were a number of children. At least two others also served in the First World War and survived. But poor old Clement, he went to Gallipoli and was injured early in May, transferred to a hospital ship, but died off Gallipoli and was buried at sea. So he is memorialised here, but the state of the grave makes that quite difficult to see. So again, we're very thankful we've been able to put clear signage on these graves. So we might turn around and head back up again. I might ask Norm to, I've lost Norm, to lead us up to Gemmell. So this is Robert Gemmell, again a family grave, and probably a little bit more in the age group that you think of in terms of those very young soldiers at Gallipoli. He was 19 when he enlisted. He was a railway porter here in Brisbane, at South Brisbane. Only son of a family with at least 2 or possibly 3 sisters as well. So he enlisted. The other thing that's quite interesting about him is that his date of death on the grave is Anzac Day, but in fact he died a few days later in early May. How that happened would be a story that would be interesting to know from the family. So he died on the 2nd of May, but he is memorialised as Anzac Day. He's also a name that eluded us for a while because it is spelt differently on the military records to the grave. So he could have been an amateur detective to do some of these things. So here's our last soldier, Harry James Tyrrell. He was 20 years of age, a very young looking Harry James. Again, someone who had come to Australia with his family, who'd migrated to Australia not that many years before he then enlisted. He was a, let me just check that so I don't tell you the wrong thing. He was a labourer, and they'd come from Norfolk in England. He was on the Omra 2 with Disraeli and Fowles that we saw up on top of the hill memorialised. And we have in the little booklet his will, and his will sort of gives us a bit of a hint of his life and his musical talents. He left his violin to his sister, but he also wanted his any money and so on he had should he die to be divided between his parents and his sweetheart. And amazingly, during the week we were contacted by a descendant of the sweetheart, who subsequently married after the war, had a family, but on every Anzac Day she would take her children and say she was doing this for Harry. So this is Harry here, whose memory lived on for a long time in that family, and now this lady, who I think is either the granddaughter or the great-granddaughter, is keeping Harry's memory alive in her commemoration of Anzac Day. So amazing connections that are possible in this day and age of internet and so on. So Harry's our last soldier. We thought we'd do a minute's silence at the end, and then just wander back to the shelter shed.
I would like to ask anyone, if you have any information on any of the veterans here, and we haven't mentioned any of it, we'd love to hear from you. If you've got any stories or information about anyone that's buried in the cemetery also. We'd like to thank you for coming today. We hope we can do this again when we've got the next lot of veterans ready. And we're also doing an honour board, hopefully by the end of the year. So we'll keep you informed of that as well. So, thank you.
Thank you very much.
Now, you can go back the way you've come, or there's some stairs just here that will take you down onto the road. Just be careful on the stairs.
Aren't you lucky?
I reckon you could actually.
So the decent folk is good.
It was nice to meet you. And you know, you never know, next year we might do another one.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.